he flannered.
Good problem to have.
Stand by.
All right, we are on.
Hey, welcome everybody to the regular stated meeting of the Yarmouth Conservation Commission. This is the meeting for Thursday, February 1st, 2024. This is to informally advise that, as required by General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 18 through 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16, 2021, as extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, the Yarmouth Conservation Commission will hold a public meeting at the date and time noted above. The public is welcome to attend either in person or via the alternative public access provided on the notice of meeting available on the Town of Yarmouth website. Our first order of business is a continued request for determination of applicability. Robert and Christine Pelletier, 295 Buck Island Road, proposed small addition in the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland within natural heritage endangered species priority habitat.
We got Anna CSP comment, came back.
Oh.
They had nothing, no comments.
So the comment is they have no comment. All right, so that makes it very easy, doesn't it? So the only reason we had continued this was for a natural heritage endangered species comment, and natural heritage comment is they have no comment. So
Excellent.
I think we're all ready to go. So now do I have a motion to formally, let's see, this is a negative 3.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. That's the quickest I think we've ever done it
Now
here.
you can go out, now you can go out to
Happy to
dinner.
Sorry to drag you out, but
Thank you. Now
feel
we can
free to go out and have a nice dinner on the
We're
town
meeting
now,
friends
right?
for dinner, so.
I was thinking of that. The town hasn't paid for my dinner in a long time.
How do you say that?
Last time, I just included an extra one in case someone was.
We're all good. Nope. All right, our next order of business is a notice of intent, Down Cape Engineering, Crawford Land Management for Walters Sequencia, 56 Camp Street, is proposed sport court, patio walls, and regrading with plantings in the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. And let the record reflect that we have just received the SE 83 number. Assigned is SE 83-2412.
Excellent. Good evening, Chairman Hoops, members of the commission. My name is Dan Ojala from Down Cape Engineering. With me from Crawford Land is
Lauren Taylor.
Lauren Taylor, and she can expand on the mitigation plantings as needed. This one comes in, I believe, under an enforcement order. The gentleman was unaware of the regulations and had cleared some of the backyard and installed fencing to level off an area there, and was reprimanded for that, and came in and has since installed the silt fence backed with a coir log against the chain link fence, and has come to Down Cape Engineering, Crawford Land Management to mitigate the situation and to permit what we think is a reasonable proposal. The wetland was flagged by Brad Hall. It's extremely thick wetland down there. We rehung flags much higher so you can see them Tuesday morning, and they cored some holes as well. Just on the wetland side, the water was 8 inches down, so that checks out. This particular area has a hydraulic connection, as was pointed out by the agent, on the far east side, and so down into the Mill Pond area, so never really gets much of a surge. So that wetland line should hold nicely. There's a fairly sharp slope into it. You can see the elevation 8 and then 9 and then 10, and it's right about the 10, so a couple feet lower just into that wetland. Generally, the wetland plants will climb up a little, and the wetlands around hydric soils within about a foot of the surface can support wetland plants. So The soils do bear out the flags that we had established originally there, so that is now out in the field, visible for inspection since Tuesday morning. I looked at it myself, and a couple of our members of our staff were out there helping Brad out with the delineation, and so that's how that works. So what we're proposing here is actually to restore that area. As is, the Barnstable regulations are similar in that if you fully restore a 50-foot buffer, then work outside of that is generally permitted as long as it doesn't influence unduly the 50-foot or the wetland. And I think we've put in a leaching trench and retaining wall to level off the ground, force the infiltration into the ground on site, rather than allow it to continue to go down further into the wetland. This site is a bit of a interesting site in that for some reason the town didn't see to put a catch basin on our side of the road. There is a berm to try and keep the road runoff from entering our site, but it doesn't do too much. You can see that it just builds up and pours onto our property and then down the side onto the neighbor's property and then back onto our property. So we'll probably contact the DPW, Camp Street is a townway, and see if they could install a basin there. There's a pretty good stretch of road that drains into this area, and it's having a puddle on the shoulder is a hazard, and runoff is much better infiltrated outside of the 100 than trying to deal with it once it gets down inside the 100. So we'll attempt to do that. But I think at the end, it's going to be a big improvement over what's there right now, currently especially. The sport court is about 25 by 50. It's got a slight pitch down into a strip drain, which goes into a leaching trench behind the wall, elevated up above the ground a couple of feet, so that you've got a nice 2+ foot separation. And say the groundwater is about 9, it'd be about 4 feet separation rather than the 2. We do mention minimum 2 on the plan, but it'll be well in excess of that. So you've got the application in front of you. We've got the narrative where we went through the performance standards. Again, Crawford Management issued a plan to revegetate the area. We think it's a comprehensive and good plan. They did a management plan and narrative. I'll let her explain that, and then would open up to any questions on fixing up this site and repairing the damage. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. For the record, Lauren Taylor with Crawford Land Management. Nick Crawford is also in attendance tonight. I think Dan touched on most of the key points, but I can expand on the mitigation and restoration work. So the first component of that work is the restoration for the enforcement order, which is in the southeastern corner of the property. So in that area, we would first remove any of the base material that was placed there, and we would reestablish the pre-existing grades just by bringing in native fill. And then we would seed that area and revegetate the entire 35-foot buffer, which was one of the requirements in that enforcement order. And then the other component of the land management work was the mitigation side of it. So that's for the proposed sport court and the proposed patio and retaining walls. So the mitigation for those site improvements would be in the form of revegetating the entire 0 to 50-foot buffer with native shrubs, grasses, and forbs. And that's in keeping with Section 6.02 of the town's wetland protection regulations. Besides that, I think the only other thing to mention is that within the limit of work for the sport court and retaining walls, there were 3 12-inch oak trees that are covered with invasive vines, primarily oriental bittersweet. So we're proposing to remove those 3, and they would be replaced in kind with red maples, all within that restoration area in the southeastern corner. But I think that covers the bulk of that information, but Nick and I can help answer any questions about the vegetation management work.
Okay. Questions from the board?
First, that's
Go ahead.
okay. I'm a little concerned about the road runoff that goes down into pervious sports court. How are we dealing with that?
So by building the grade up for the sports court a little bit, we're going to shunt it and leave it on the neighbor's land where it's well outside. It'll be running down outside of the 100, and it may get into the 100, but you can see on the top there, the little retaining wall that's coming off the garage and does an L shape. The water currently runs way up about where the 20 contour is, and then down. And so by building up the sports court, we're going to shunt that into the natural area near the 100-foot buffer, and hopefully we'll get some halfway decent infiltration there, and you won't have any problems. But I would definitely recommend the town put in a drain. I don't believe they have an easement, and right now there's a berm on the side, which I can't imagine it does anything except create a nice big shoulder puddle there. There is a basin across the street. Maybe perhaps the original road was super elevated and pitched to the west, and when they redid it, they crowned it and put some on our side. But that's speculation, but I really don't know why there isn't a basin on our side as well. So we'll see if we can get the DPW to address that and put one in. In the meantime, that's what the water will do. It'll go down the gravel, which and then shunt into the woods on the north.
So Dan, I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
What's the material for the sport court?
It's paved, so it's impervious material. I would imagine, well, I don't know for sure whether it's asphalt or concrete, but it would be a paved court.
So on the property, to start, we're going from elevation 22 down to 15, I think it is? Probably 14, 15.
Yeah, 12 if you count down by the low fence.
Yeah. So at the very least, I would like to see some sort of dry well to contain the storm runoff at the bottom of the sport court. I think it's, asking the town to install some sort of drainage is, I think that's outside of our purview. We want to see this contained in this property.
100%. But just to be clear, if I wasn't, at the end of the sport court, there's a strip drain and going into a nice big dry well. So it's called out as proposed 3x15 leaching trench. And then it shows a little bit better on Crawford Land Management's plan where you can actually see the detail of the strip drain. That's what we're proposing, and so that'll handle that nicely. Now, that won't handle the road runoff. That's going to be shunted to leave it on the neighbor's side because we're filling on our side, and so the water would unable to be tracked. It would hit the wall and just infiltrate on the north side. And I imagine before the clearing happened, that's probably exactly what it did. But the gravel will, then can be removed after the project, and that can be naturalized, I imagine, or let the weeds grow up in the gravel, however naturalized. Most of it's outside the 100, but it does, certainly now when it cuts across the lot, it goes right down to the fence, and so that's going to be mitigated. I think to your point, there is a bit of water that comes down here. If you'd like to condition roof dry wells for the rear of the house, I think that would be a fine condition we could live with. That would probably help a lot too, because there is still a bit of a pitch in the back, and we don't want to impact the wetland too much.
I think I'd like to see strip drains on 3 sides, because we're going to get a lot of runoff down there.
So, on the sides of the sport court as well as the bottom?
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt. They shouldn't gather much because unless there's a Cape Cod berm edge, it's a very flat surface, but they'd pick up a little bit. I think we could return those to some extent without too much trouble.
Great, thank you.
Well, I have a couple of questions. The first one is off of Mr. Bishop's, is you're shunting all the water off to the neighbor's property. How do they feel about that?
Well, I'm not sure, but it travels there now, and then it travels onto our property, so, it's a matter where, they're much higher. They've got a huge lot that their house is not proximate to this, and it's all pitched down into the wetlands, so, we could certainly ask them about it and so forth, but, you know, it's just a matter of the town water runs down there, and we're just not letting it back from their property back onto our property. So it's, you know, again, it goes onto their property naturally, and then it comes back onto ours. We're just stopping it from coming back onto ours. I don't know. It would probably be a civil matter, but the best thing would be to get a road drain in there to stop that.
Okay, my other question, which was not off of his, is how much fill is going to be needed for this proposed court? Because moving the elevation line from 16 to where you're proposing 16, it's like 20 feet, so that's like 500 square feet of fill. And then moving it from 16 to the 14 and a half is another 500 square feet of fill by what I've calculated out here.
Yeah, so, you know, you'd measure in cubic feet, and then usually, because usually you're doing yards, cubic yards, which would be 3 times 3 times 3, so 27 cubic feet in 1 cubic yard. Usually talk about yards. But, you know, you're looking on the low side about a 3-foot fill, because it's going from 13 to close to 16 where the strip drain is. You know, so it's a fairly good amount of material, but I think the important point is that it's being retained with a wall and leveled and infiltrated, so that rather than a sloped, and what it is now is kind of messy gravel. Obviously, that's not a great condition, but it'll be leveled off and paved, and all that water infiltrated right into the ground behind the wall. So it'll be much less runoff than what is now. But, you know, the square footage, I'd have to do the arithmetic on it, but you're talking 2 to 3 feet of fill times probably
size of the
30
lot.
by 50, if we want to do the arithmetic on it. And then the rest of the yard, you're only talking about from 0 to 1 foot of fill. It's not much, but the sport court is elevated a little bit on a level playing field, you know, so.
Yeah,
it's,
it is, but
fairly level.
it's quite a slope there, and it's going to be a lot of fill to make that a level playing field. Just
Yeah, it's a fair amount, yeah.
that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Anybody else? Jack?
You said earlier that, I think, that there's been fill already made in that area on the southeast.
Well, who knows way back in the day, what I was referring to is there's a pretty sharp slope into the wetland. It could be natural, it might not be. But the site right now is you know, from 11 and a half, 12 at the fence, sloping up to the back of the house, and it's you know, it's a fairly good, in 60 feet or so, you're going up 5 or 6 feet, so it's
So
a
that
pretty good slope.
That may have come out of near the house, or may have been brought in.
Yeah, it could well be. It looks like you know, like a semi-walkout or half walkout type situation. So a lot of times they will dig into the hill, and the material that comes out, they level the backyard with. Would be pretty typical.
You know what kind of, how you would characterize that soil?
Well, generally on Cape Cod, you have good sand in this area. It's out Carver Course,
But
out Wash
specific,
Plain.
I understand what is there now, do you know?
Yeah.
What was brought in?
This material that was brought in looks like dense graded crushed stone, you know, so that's pervious, but not as pervious as sand.
So if you bring in new soil, proper soil for the mitigation area, if that's on top of the old fill, what's that going to do?
So, to your point, we'd scrape off, and I don't know if it's in the prep notes or not, but we'd be happy to, you know, scrape off the gravel before we plant it. It's a little bit unnatural to have that there, and then you generally have a sandy granular fill, and then a decent topsoil on top
No,
to support the
that'd be
plants.
really nice, yeah.
Yeah, and then that would be a much better situation than leaving compacted gravel underneath the plants. Good point.
Anybody else? Brittany, anything? Oh, Paul, I'm sorry.
I had 2 quick questions. There's this small area below the wall outside the 50-foot buffer. There's just no note. Is that going Oh, there is a note. Never mind. Seed area with restoration seed mix. So this basically will not be lawn. It will be allowed to naturalize.
Right, that would be the same seed mix. It's in the bottom right corner of the plan, so the same seed mix for the restoration and mitigation areas, which is all native grasses, not turf lawn.
Okay, great. We appreciate the 50-foot being fully revegetated. My only concern is that you do have to get rid of 3 12-inch oaks, you said?
Right.
And, I mean, I see 3 15-gallon maples going in. Usually the commission requires more of a tree replacement unless they're satisfied with the full 50 being restored, which we don't usually get to see.
Yeah, I don't understand why maple versus oak back then.
That was just based on the wetland conditions down in that corner. It's a little bit wetter down there because it's closer to the wetland. But if, we could definitely substitute oaks for the maples.
I mean, oaks give you a lot better.
I don't,
Care about
if you're putting the trees down toward the wetland, then the red maple, I think, would be better.
Okay.
I mean, if you absolutely had to go with oak, then I would go with a pin oak, or, not pin oak, but
I'm sure we could,
white oak.
yeah, I'm
There
sure
you
we
go.
could substitute one of the maples for an oak too, just for a little bit more diversity.
Yeah, I mean, you could add one, and I'd just switch one out for one. I mean, I don't have I'd prefer not to see trees get taken down, but, I mean, the 3 that are getting taken down are in the 50 to 100,
Yeah.
so.
There's also a picture in the land management plan. The trees are pretty heavily covered with oriental bittersweet, so in their existing condition, their health is suffering as it is, so, yeah, I mean, the quality of them is, they're not at their strongest.
One other point, which I just want to stress, is that we're also going to relocate that fence from where it is 15 feet off the wetland and put it right at the 50, so that you get a nice firm demarcation on the line. It's noted a little bit better on the Crawford land than ours, but it is drafted on ours as well, to have that fence be relocated up to the 50-foot buffer. So make sure nobody gets down in there after we plant. Would we have a gate for maintenance, or probably wouldn't hurt, huh?
Yeah, no, we could include that.
Okay, Brittany, anything else?
No.
All right, is there anybody in the audience who has a question or comment on this project? This is for 56 Camp Street. If anybody on Zoom has any comments, questions for 56 Camp Street, raise your hand digitally. I see none. Unless there is any other further discussion among the board, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the project with special conditions?
I'll make a motion.
Conditions being stripping the process away, replacing that soil, and the 2 additional strip drains.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's a week, because I forgot we do it. So, Dan, you'll be able to get a revised plan showing those strip drains addition?
Be happy to do that, and I'll highlight the fact that the fence is moving on my plan as well as the landscape plan. That sounds fine.
The process
Okay,
for
so is
replacing
there-
all the appropriate soil, then the 3 strip.
Is there a second?
And
Oh, I'm sorry,
I
Pat.
was going to mention, it was noted about the planting by May 30th. It's-
Yeah, they did have in their land management plan that the enforcement portion up to the 35 would be planted, but we would also add that as a condition in the order, just to make sure.
Seconded.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. And we'll wait for the revised plan, Dan, and
Excellent. We really appreciate your careful consideration, and we'll get that right in. Thank you.
Thank you.
all right, next order of business is another notice of an.
The first one that we did.
Take a minute here. Hold on.
Did he send down Buck Island?
Did we have Buck Island? We didn't sign the first one.
We signed it last time.
Just signed it last week.
We did?
That way she's trouble.
Somebody pulled a fast one on me and switched things around on the file.
I understand.
Must have been Catherine.
Yeah. Mr. Wilkinson's here.
Oh,
Go up in the top. I don't know. I want you to.
yes.
It's a small one.
That's Steve.
Oh, that's the one across.
All right, next order of business is another notice of intent for SE 83-2411 Cape and Islands Engineering and Wilkinson Ecological Design for Adrian Hollander, 6 Buttercup Lane, proposed shoreline stabilization and reinforced salt marsh in riverfront area, coastal bank, coastal beach, land subject to coastal storm flowage, and the buffer zone to a salt marsh.
Evening.
So state your name for the record.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Lizardi from Cape and Islands Engineering, representing the applicant for this project, and Seth
Could you spell
Wilkinson,
your name, please?
RAUL
Yeah.
LIZARDI,
EI? Thank you.
and Seth Wilkinson from Wilkinson Ecological, representing the applicant for this project. As mentioned, there are several resources at this site within 100 feet. Fallen Pond, which is also considered a stream, so there is riverfront associated to it. There is a salt marsh, there's a coastal bank. The coastal bank at the toe is eroding, and there is land subject to coastal storm flowage. The project is stabilization of the toe of this bank since it's been eroding, and some land management to remove some invasives on the bank. For that, I will pass it over to Seth that has a better explanation of what's happening here. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. For the record, Seth Wilkinson. This is solely a resource enhancement project. There's no development proposed. As Raul mentioned, the 2 primary activities are some limited invasive species management. Fortunately, it's a relatively early invasion of English ivy and black locust, saplings, just in the sapling form. So fortunately, we feel we can just nip these in the bud, so to speak, and the nice native plant community which remains will be in better shape. Fortunately, most of the coastal bank is still in good shape, so again, this is sort of taking action early, which is great because you generally have to do as much work when you address both your erosion and your invasive species management early on. We're confident the native plant community will respond very well, essentially be released and allowed to just continue to function well. And we have started to see a 2 to 4 foot high scarp form at the base of the coastal bank, and in our experience, those generally don't sort of heal on their own, especially with the prevalence of the southeasterly storms we're seeing now in the winter in the last 5 or 6 years. This winter's been a pretty good example of that. So it needs a little helping hand, and when we evaluated the site fully, we observed the invasives being somewhat of a threat to the ecological integrity of the site. And we also noticed that there just really wasn't any high marsh community remaining. There's a good population of low marsh, fringing marsh, which is great. And with sea level rise, that marsh will need to migrate landward. Usually what happens with more natural levels of sea level rise, or salt marsh migration rather, in response to sea level rise, is they would each move landward. So what we've proposed is to leave some room for the high marsh to move sort of up beyond mean high water, and then to restore salt marsh at the base of the coastal bank, so it'll be a little elevated, and it'll basically be at the right elevation when sea level rise continues to come up as we expect it to. It should be at just the right elevation when it's fully established, which takes many years for salt marsh. The method that we're using is actually quite similar to Form Alpha, which most of you will probably recall, because I think it was less than a year that we brought that in front of you, and it's a new technique, a technique that we developed in consultation with Mass DP, with Jim Mahala specifically, who is now retired, now long retired, and to address specific locations like this. We had looked at fiber rolls, but felt it was just really too low, too close to the tidal range, and so we actually initially had that design and then evolved it to cobble reinforced marsh. So there are some cobblestones, smaller cobblestones, 6 to 8 inches, which are incorporated into the growing medium, which is also compatible sediment and organic compost, and it's encapsulated in a fully biodegradable coconut fiber blanket stitched together. That breaks down over a roughly 2-year period, during which time the marsh establishes and basically the plant roots take the place of the biodegradable coconut fiber matting. As some of you may know, the Malfa project was well tested recently in the January storms a few weeks ago, and it remained completely intact. There was some loss of the dune, which you would expect in a storm of that intensity. We've already renourished the dune and sort of done exactly sort of what we were expecting, and the homeowner feels that installation actually saved her house. So we're glad we got it in the nick of time, because it went in this fall. But it remains in good condition, and we feel it's a beneficial design for these types of sites. So with that overview, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Seth. Questions from the commission?
I have one thought, that part of the work, some is from the upland, and some they're going to use a barge, just as long as the barge is not grounded out at low tide.
I meant to cover that. Thank you. Could I respond? Because we have a nice small barge with really low. Well, we don't have it. Another company has it, and that's who we work with for projects like this. After we filed it, we were checking with them, and they informed us that it was going to be out of commission for quite some time. But unfortunately, we'd already submitted. So what we would actually like to do is use very small equipment and essentially convey it down over the bank from the top. So use a bigger excavator to lower some small, if you're familiar with the Dingo, it's like a walk-behind loader, and what I call a micro excavator, because it's so much smaller than most mini excavators. They're about 25 horsepower, so these are they almost look like kids' toys. But for small, this is only an 80-foot long intervention, so they're suitable for this, and they can be lowered down with the larger equipment, which would just stay on the lawn and convey it down over the bank. So we'd be happy to just update that protocol to articulate that and submit that right away, but I wanted to just mention that this evening, and I'd intended to in my comments, so thank you.
Will they be left on the beach, or will they be removed tidally?
We put these bags, they're about 1 yard, they hold about 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot, to quote Dan from earlier, 1 yard bags with loops on them full of just sand, and we create a little platform near the bottom of the bank within the work area so that they can be elevated. It can be a little rough to sort of pull them up and back. In a project like this, we can usually finish in about a week, so it wouldn't be there for
They would sit down there during.
It wouldn't sit like in the intertidal or anything like that. Yeah.
I'd just like to congratulate the applicant for getting ahead of the curve on this, because it's a fairly dynamic shoreline there in Fallon's Pond, and there's little, if any, change to the properties to the east, but property to the west is ahead of this in terms of degradation. So I'm happy to see that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Brittany, anything?
I just had one question about this gap between the fringe marsh and the proposed high marsh. Are you leaving that there just for, I mean, for rack accumulation because you don't expect anything to survive in that beach?
Yes, it's a few different reasons. We're trying to stay out of federal jurisdiction.
Okay.
One, it just is a lot more than most private owners can entertain from the fees as well as the timing. There is a really significant, I think, because we're in, sort of more of a pond.
Yeah.
Technically, this is still riverfront, but, you get these, thank you. Don't typically see that raft of oak leaves in most marine environments. And so we do anticipate that's not going to change. The location of that could change over time. We do like to put in seasonally, just a little temporary snow fencing, comes out for the winter. But if a raft of flotsam and jetsam comes over these new plantings in the first few years, this is in the protocol. That fencing just keeps it from going on the new plants, so we're leaving a place for it basically to accumulate. And then I think over time, that raft may move up closer to the marsh when it's established. Usually they can handle that, but we think that will provide some runway for the migratory pathway of the existing low marsh.
Okay.
So it's sort of like three reasons.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure. So I didn't see anything about that temporary snow fence in this unless I missed it. Are you proposing that for this?
I believe it might be down in. Yes, I believe I saw it in there.
Might just be in the narrative and not on the.
It's only in the work protocols, I believe.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find it for you.
Yep, the bottom of page 21.
Okay. And I'm also happy to put in a condition to allow for that barge work in case in case the situation changes.
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to use that. There's just not many of them, so I think that's great if you could
Okay.
accommodate that. We'd certainly work with you to let you know if we're going to switch back to that, but we think we can do it by lowering it down too. So.
Okay. Great. I don't have any further questions. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody in the audience have any questions on this one? Anybody on Zoom have any questions for 6 Buttercup Lane? I see none. Is there any further discussion among the board? If not, would somebody like?
I just go along with Rick and think that's a good job.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion then to approve the project with special conditions?
So moved. David beat me to it.
I got David
I'll
and
second.
Ellie. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right, our next order of business, our request for certificate of compliance. The first one is for SE 83-2291, 310 South Shore Drive. And you should have something in here.
Oh, there's no note. I just, upon my inspection, I discussed with the applicant, this is a vegetation management only project, and it's very difficult for the commission to determine the success of these projects, especially when there's herbaceous ground cover involved, and there were some bare areas. So I spoke with the applicant, and we decided that we were going to continue it to June 6th, so that we could more easily evaluate the conditions of the plantings there.
You said June 6th?
June 6th.
Okay. So do I have a motion to continue this request to June 6th?
So moved.
Your second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. And next order of business actually is another request for certificate of compliance for SE 83-2293, 47 Nickerson Way. This is a partial COC, and everything is okay with that. So do I have a motion to issue the partial certificate of compliance for SE 83-229347 Nickerson Farm Way.
Second.
Paul? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Moving. Yes, I will. Moving on, we have an enforcement issue to discuss next. This is Brian J. Wall, Troy Wall, Associates for Rosangela Coliero, Oyster Cove Road. This is an unpermitted dock and land under the ocean. Brittany, do you want to give us a rundown first, and then we'll go to Attorney Wall?
Sure. This is located in Oyster Cove on the Bass River, and they were in over the summer.
Chairman, I'd like to recuse
Oh,
myself.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry, so let the record reflect that,
Patricia Mulhern.
sorry, Pat
Commissioner
Pat
Mulhern.
Mulhern has recused herself.
Sorry, yes, so there is a dock located in Oyster Cove in the Bass River, and it has never been permitted through the wetlands program locally or through the state DEP. So this is continuing from the summer. There was an enforcement issue with the redeployment of floating docks that were grounding during low tide. They were removed, and during these storm events that we were hit with successively in early January, part of the dock was destroyed and then reconstructed in place. So since this dock has never been permitted, they did not have the proper permissions to reconstruct this dock in place. So they were sent an enforcement order to remove the dock and attend this hearing.
Okay, so the dock, occurs on 50, what is it? What's the address for this?
The written address
D9.
doesn't have a number.
You just
Doesn't have a number.
I might be able to help with that.
Can you tell me what?
ownership.
Yeah, for the record, my name's Brian Wall. I'm an attorney and I represent Rosa Angela Caliero, if I can say that right. My client owns 59 Oyster Cove Road, which is up the road a ways.
29.
29, I'm sorry, 29. And there's a common beach at the end of the road, and the dock in question is on that common beach.
But it belongs to 59 Oyster Cove, right?
So there's a bit of a side issue that's not really before this board, but all of the properties on the road have the right to use that beach. And the dock has been associated with my client's property for quite some time. There was a Chapter 91 license for the dock. It was an interim license. And when my client bought the property about a year ago, if you recall, I don't know if you know what an interim license is, but there was an amnesty program back in the early 90s, and you would come forward and they gave you a permit for as long as you own the property. And then when the property is sold, the new owner has to go relicense the dock. And my client is in the process of doing that. So the dock is associated with my client's property. The prior owner built it and got it licensed in the name of the predecessor in title to my client. So it's her dock. There is a dispute, though. Some of the neighbors, and I'm kind of new to the case, so I don't want to say more than I know yet, but there's a Mr. Ayotte who lives nearby, and he's contesting whether or not the easement rights in the beach permit the dock to be there. But that's a side issue that we're going to work on outside of this. I'm here tonight to talk about the enforcement order.
Yeah, so I did speak with the Waterways Program, a representative, and he did confirm that it's an interim approval. It's not a full Chapter 91, but it has been submitted by the applicant, and it's still in the process, so it has not been issued or approved yet. They're currently reviewing it, but, so I did speak with him about that and
Right.
to confirm.
So shouldn't they be here before us with a notice of intent as well?
So that's what I'm here to talk about. Sorry, this is kind of getting a little disjointed. So what I'm here about tonight is my client concedes the repairs were done without a permit because there is no permit for this dock. It was built before the Wetlands Protection Act, as far as I understand. She did the work, or her husband actually did the work, without a permit. That's not disputed. We're not here to challenge the enforcement order. I'm simply trying to explain what happened. My client bought the property. Part of what she bought was this dock. It had a Chapter 91 license. It was an interim approval, which means the license was valid as long as the prior owner had the property. When my client bought the property, it triggered a period of 1 year within which the license would stay in effect, but that she has to get a new license. It's a process to bring people up to code. They basically gave amnesty to these old docks that weren't properly permitted, and they said eventually it's going to come into compliance. My client didn't really understand all of this. It's kind of complicated. She thought it was fully permitted, and in a way it was because it had the license. Her intent right now, because she's hired me to give her advice, and she's also hired Bob Perry of Cape Cod Engineering, and we both advised her what she needs to do is file a notice of intent for a new dock that's going to replace this dock, and it's going to be designed per current regulations as the docks are. This old dock is not, you can see from the pictures, it's not built according to current standards. So what I'm simply asking the board tonight is to keep the enforcement order the way it is, which required all the floating material to be removed, which it was, and now it's wintertime, it's obviously out of the water. But the dock is important to my client for two reasons. One is the relicensing process with Chapter 91. It's better if the dock is physically there. And also because of this other property rights dispute that, I shouldn't even call it a dispute, there are questions about whether the dock can be there. I have not talked to any of these private property owners yet, but a dispute might be brewing over whether the dock can be there or not. And because of that dispute, I would simply ask the board to allow what you see to remain with the representation that we will be coming in with a notice of intent as soon as we are able. And when I say able, it's up to Bob Perry to do the work. He's been retained. I think he's done the survey work already, but he has to do the design work. And so I don't know how long that takes. Engineers are all really busy these days. But if you could put maybe a time frame on it that we'd have to file the notice of intent within 90 days or something like that. Or maybe I should say 4 months.
I was going
So
to
the
say that.
enforcement order,
So, to be
that
clear,
it's just the removal of all newly built structure.
Yeah, so that's kind of a semantics because, could you put the other picture up, Brittany?
which,
You could show what was there before.
okay.
I have it here. I can hold it up if you want me to.
Got some more photos in here. Oh, here's the damaged
Yeah,
one.
so that was there.
That's after the storm damage.
Yeah.
I can find
So-
another.
What happened was there was a dock there, and then the storm, so there was an enforcement order that said take the floats out because they were on the ground. And then the storm came and there was damage, and then I'm not trying to explain or make excuses, but my client's from Brockton. She doesn't, most of us here on the Cape know what wetlands are, but she didn't really understand it. And her husband is handy and went out and repaired the damage, which is what you see there. So we're simply asking that if that could simply remain there while this notice of intent is prepared and filed, because again, if there is a property dispute, my client doesn't want to compromise her position. And so we'd simply ask that the dock, what you see there, remain while we file and pursue a notice of intent and an order of conditions.
It was not repaired in kind, that's for sure.
I mean,
It's a bit different.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
What I'm trying to understand is, what would happen if you took down the dock? What are you saying, that you would lose the right to build a new one?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I don't want to prejudice her position. I'm kind of new to the case, so I don't want to say too much. I don't want to get out when something I'm not sure about. But everyone has an easement to use the beach. And I think that the argument may be that the easement rights don't include the right to build a dock because it interferes with the use of the beach. But the counter argument is that the dock has been there for more than 20 years and it's been licensed to my client's property, so it's appurtenant to and part of her property. And I just don't want to prejudice that claim if we end up in the land court or the Superior Court over these relative easement rights. I don't want to prejudice that because of taking it out.
And when you say licensed, it has received a 91 license
Not a full 91. It had an interim approval.
20 years ago.
50 years ago, probably.
No, it was in the early 90s. So the dock, I don't know when the dock was built, but if I can explain just briefly. So what happened was there were many of these docks all over the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. People just simply didn't really understand. And Chapter 91 is about public access. So what the Chapter 91 program does is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts owns the land below the low water mark. So to have a dock out in the water, you have to pay what's called an occupation fee. You need a license, which is a legal term for permission. So you need permission from the Commonwealth to have the dock in the water. And Chapter 91 also protects what's called the public trust rights, which are the rights of fishing, fouling, and navigation. And so they protect what's called lateral access along the shore. And that's usually protected one of two ways. The dock is elevated sufficient so that a person can walk under, or they have a set of stairs up one side and down the other, and they have to grant permission to the public to walk over there. So because people didn't really understand this, the Chapter 91 program in the early 1990s created an amnesty program. And they basically said, if you have a dock that's not licensed, come forward. We want to get you into the fold, and we're going to give you what's called an interim approval. It was a Chapter 91 license, but what it means was it was interim in the sense that it lasted as long as you owned your property. And the person here had owned the property from the 1990s, that the license goes back to then. My client bought it about a year ago, and the interim approval triggers, the sale triggers a 1-year period where you have to refile. And the idea, obviously, is when you close on the property, if you're advised by an attorney to do this, you get right on it, and you probably get the license before the year runs out. My client didn't really fully understand that. She thought it was a Chapter 91 license. But she has applied, and she's got an application pending for a Chapter 91 license. But that's for the old dock, and we fully understand that that's not something that the commission would want. And so we're going to come in with a notice of intent for a new and improved dock.
Well, is it even permittable under 91 standards now, what they've submitted?
Yeah, she submitted, it's called a simplified process, and I think that her application was accepted. It hasn't been acted upon, but it's on file. But what we will be doing is, without getting too far ahead, I don't want to presume that we're going to get the permit, but we want to file with you for an order of conditions for a new, improved, better designed dock, and then apply for a Chapter 91 license for that dock. The ultimate goal is to replace this with a more modern, better environmentally designed dock, and then get that license with Chapter 91. And I'm simply here, the floats are out, the floats can remain out. You can say the floats shouldn't go back in or can't go back in, that's fine. We don't want to prejudice her legal rights until I work out things with the neighbors.
Well,
And I
I'm
was
not sure
hired.
how that's going to prejudice, I mean, first of all, I don't know if it's really our worry whether or not we prejudice her application, but I guess my question is how by removing the newly built material, is that going to prejudice your client's right to apply or ultimately get a 91 permit or this interim permit?
We've applied for a full license. She's applied for her Chapter 91 license. The interim is the one that's expired. I know it's kind of complicated here. How can my client be prejudiced by that? My honest answer is I don't know. What happens is when you get involved in litigation, each lawyer does the best they can for their client, and they come up with whatever they can come up with for their client. And I would just like to keep the status quo is all I'm asking. And I'm asking with the representation that Bob Perry has been hired and he's been tasked with preparing an application. So I'm not asking for this forever. I'm simply asking for a little bit of breathing room, and we will be back before you as soon as he is administratively able to prepare the application. That's all. Just asking for status quo for a few months.
But it's
Substantially different.
status quo of something that
Was never
was
permitted.
never approved by this board, so.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm still trying to figure out how somebody who isn't abutting this right-of-way was able to put a dock on a right-of-way that they don't own.
Those are
Legally.
Well, they
a
have-
little outside our purview.
Yeah, that's-
So let's try and focus on the.
No, I know, but it's just.
Even so is waterways, so I know it's good to understand all the bits and pieces of this, but let's try and focus on our wetlands regulations, the DEP regulations, and this dock.
I mean, personally, I really do not like to see, I don't know what these lower stringers going at the bottom of the two 4x4
Horizontal
posts at the
ones?
front and at the ladder.
I bet the 4x4s out waterside don't sink into the ground. I think they're relying on that
To hold it
2x8
above the
to
sand.
support it.
So those 4x4s aren't even in the,
That'd be my guess. I haven't been out there for a long time, but.
okay. Because I was my personal viewpoint on this would have been, it's like, well, just leave the 4x4 posts in the ground where they are. And that, to me, says, I mean, then I think your issue of prejudice is no longer there, because, I mean, obviously the dock was there. I mean, you had those two piles, whatever they were, there, but.
Doesn't the picture prove that they were there, and even if we make them take it out? That's a possibility too,
Can I ask a question, please?
Yep, go ahead.
Seems to me, and I don't remember this, but we asked that, or this board, the commission, asked that the floating docks be taken out, right? And did it say anything at that time, Brittany, about this other portion of the dock, what to do with it?
We were hoping that they would file a notice of intent, and.
Okay.
But, I mean, we didn't tell them that
We didn't require
when
it,
destroyed, they could rebuild it.
So-
We allowed it to stay with the understanding that an NOI would be filed. But that was the same one that had been in place for many years that was unpermitted, as opposed to something that has just went in.
Yeah. So
Also-
it seems to me, thank you for that information, but it seems to me that things are being done to try to rectify this on the part of the owner, with the help of Attorney Day and maybe other people, Bob Perry, et cetera. And there are peripheral concerns about this having to do with, the right to have a dock there at all, and all the peripheral types of things that are going on, which we don't have any say over. That's a matter for another board. So it seems to me, after hearing this, that I don't know if it's a matter of tabling this until they come in with that NOI, with showing what they want to do with this and what they're doing as far as the permitting, okay? Instead of just acting now and having them take that out, and I hope nobody walks on it because it doesn't look too safe, and do that as expeditiously as possible so that something could be done that, number one, is safe, number two, is permitted, and all the other legal things are taken care of as appropriate with other folks, the court or whoever it may be. But let's see what Bob Perry says. Let's see what the plan is. Let's take a look at, consider the NOI when it does come in short order. I think we would be making good progress and being respectful to the efforts that are being made right now.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think that's an excellent idea, because what it does is it leaves the ratification of the enforcement order pending, And so if you become unsatisfied at some point, you can just simply revoke the tabling and take action. And meanwhile, again, I don't want to promise what Bob Perry's schedule is, but he's been hired and he's been tasked to prepare a notice of intent. So we will be back before you as soon as possible.
I just would be worried about allowing the rebuilding of a structure that is not permitted and being on record and setting precedents for another situation where someone has built something against our regulations and the state regulations, and we allow it to remain in place where we would not usually.
Are you talking about the rebuilding going from what we saw on the old thing to this?
The entire structure was never permitted under the wetlands
well-
program. So we wouldn't, I don't know, can't speak to why we haven't noticed.
Well, I don't know. I
but-
think a lot of effort's being done, and it's been there for a long time. And how long has this new construction been up? Just this past year?
January 1st.
Yeah, well,
Just
give it a little more time. Let people come in with
And
the plan.
If I may too, with regard to what Brittany said, you're not approving it. The enforcement order is there. It's hanging, it's actually, to use a Greek mythology, it's Damocles' sword hanging over their head. There's no precedent being set. You're not approving it, you're not allowing it. You're just delaying action on the enforcement order while we come in with a notice of intent.
But what would be the, never mind, you guys can discuss what you want to
So-
move forward.
Rick has something.
Sharon, as far as two things that we're not in charge of, or it's not under our purview. First of all, the safety of the dock as it currently is. And as far as my knowledge, the state actually, if the dock is taken out, that means it's a new dock. And I've seen several cases where they haven't allowed people to put it back in once they took it out. So I would argue that to keep us neutral at this point and let it work out, pretty much Dave's suggestion.
Paul?
So, Mr. Chairman Hoops, no matter what goes forward here, that is unpermittable structure. So we would ask that it be removed no matter what, because it is completely outside our regulations. And we would not permit it under any circumstance, as it is right now.
I mean, the way I look at it is like if we leave it and amend the enforcement order by leaving the structure that's there and putting on a date that you must file a notice of intent by a date certain.
Well, Mr. Chairman, my issue here is what they replaced it with is significantly different than what was there in the first place. And what was there in the first place wasn't any safer, but it's beefier, it's bigger, it's not replaced in kind, which if we have any kind of damage for a storm or anything, it's replaced in kind. This does not follow that in our regulations either, even though it's illegal.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's, so again, if we say, yeah, carry it, you must file a notice of intent by a date certain, and then they don't do it, so then we can start fining them. We can fine them every day, $300 every day. I don't know if that's gonna be, why would we be doing that? I think the issue is, I mean, it's an illegal structure. It's never been there. It wasn't supposed to be there. It was never permitted before the commission. That is significantly more than what was there illegally to begin with. I'm not sure why we would allow that to stand. I mean, I don't see how having, you know, I mean, obviously, I don't think I would step out on that structure at all. I certainly wouldn't tie a boat up to it. You can't tie a boat up to it, really. It's not functional as a dock. And so does that mean, I mean, where do we draw the line?
Well, I think that,
More piles and that's enough? That's a dock?
the way I look at it is that this will not be forever. There's reasonable explanations as to how this is, the folks are gonna pursue this. It's not going to be standing there forever. It's been there for a long time in a little bit of a different form. I don't see the big change. The size of it looks to me pretty much the same. And so to be reasonable with local people who have this difficulty, because leaving it in also, it's been explained that it might jeopardize the ability for the person to even have a dock at all. And that may be, and that's not our concern, that's the concern of maybe the land court or whoever.
That's right, so it
But
shouldn't
give
turn
them an
into our argument.
opportunity, give them an opportunity to work with Bob Perry, to work with Brittany for that matter, as far as the filing for the NOI and so on, and come back in whatever reasonable amount of time you have, 2 months or a month or whatever it is, with a plan, and then you'll see how it will be improved, instead of causing some real consternation in terms of taking it out now and then causing a lot of other problems with somebody who's trying to do things the right way in terms of long run, building, designing an appropriate dock, et cetera. So that's all I'm saying. Let's be reasonable.
I will just add one more comment to please try and stay focused. And also, either way, it would be considered a new dock under this board, under DEP. So under the other entities that may be under this board, it would be considered a new dock because it's never been permitted.
Never been there.
So, I mean, for the argument where remaining might help for waterways, it would not help with this board.
No, I understand that, and I'm not making that argument. But just to one further fact, when I said the amnesty program was in the early 90s, so the evidence is that this dock has been there since at least the 1980s and probably before. And when my client bought the property, it was marketed as having a dock. She paid accordingly for that right, and she's realizing there's some gray areas.
Yeah, but what does that have to do with us?
I'm asking you as a human being, just if you could table it for 60 days and we'll come back with a notice of intent. That's all I'm asking. We can see it doesn't have a permit, the work was done without a permit. I'm not trying to argue that at all. I'm just simply saying she's hired a team. She didn't understand this and did these things without knowing, but she's hired an engineer, she's hired an attorney. I'm telling you that we're going to be coming back in with a notice of intent as soon as we are able to do so.
I know you're the new attorney on this, but, and something I've said many times at this table, it's not our issue if an attorney her original attorney doesn't explain to her what her legal rights are. To me, that's an unpermitted dock, and I would vote to have it taken down.
Well, I would suggest tabling it and making that vote later, see, under new conditions. There certainly was grandfathered in, and,
I mean, unless you can provide evidence that it very clearly was existing before the wetlands regulations, I would agree with Commissioner Bernstein, the chairman, that it's an unpermitted structure and should be removed. But if you can get us that proof, it's been there before the wetlands regulations, then it's different.
yeah.
So how much time will we allow them to try to discover that proof?
I don't know. I mean, it hasn't been,
Well,
they've had a chance to submit it in the past, but if they ask for time,
Can I have time? I was hired about a week ago, and I called Brittany.
mean, there's-
read the whole file on the computer, and trying to do this the right way. I can go look at historical aerials to see if I can come up with some, there's some great websites out there nowadays that show these things.
I mean, I think there's proof against you in the file from the neighbor, citing aerials from 80 that the dock was not present. But, so I don't know.
It goes back to the due diligence of her closing lawyer, when she bought the
Original.
property.
Yeah.
And that wasn't me.
Yeah, and we understand that.
I know what an interim license is. Some lawyers don't know what it is either. They don't know. And I'm sure you've seen it too. Sometimes due diligence is done and the dock was altered without a permit, and then somebody figures out that it doesn't match the license, and I'm sure you've had cases like that.
I can think of a few times that's happened since I've been on the board.
Yeah, it's a complicated area. Not everybody knows, they should. There's no excuse, but it's a complicated area.
Well, the state also confused things by having that interim period.
They did, because the law hadn't changed. I always tell this to clients, when you talk about the Back Bay in Boston, that's all filled tidelands. They all had Chapter 91 licenses until the legislature took care of it by legislation. The law's been around since the 1850s, and the public trust rights, fishing, fouling, and navigation goes back to the colonial ordinance of 1641, I think. So,
So we will get to you. We will ask for public comment in just a minute, okay? Well, actually, I don't know
I mean,
why
we
I'm
actually don't.
I'll be comfortable giving them 30 days.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we table this matter for a period of 30 days and have the attorney or the owners come back with their plans so that we can decide at that time whether or not this stock should be removed or if an NOI would be approved.
You mean just the plans, or would you say the proof of what
I would
Brittany
say
asked for?
proof.
Well, either.
Yeah, include the proof that the dock predated the Wetland Protection Act. That was a motion, I need a second.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Is all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Two-
3-3.
Tie
Doesn't
vote.
pass.
Wait, can you say who said nay?
Nay?
Nay, raise your hand. Ricky voted aye.
I did.
Okay, so 3-3 does not pass. Someone can offer an alternate motion, or you have to, because we still
Well, I
have to
could
act
make
on
an
the
alternate motion, but
enforcement order.
Get there and make it.
would somebody like to make an alternate motion?
What does that mean?
Something that
Well, the first one.
The first motion did not pass because it was
did not
tied.
pass, so, Lee, you have a motion you want to,
What did he say? 60 days, right?
30 days.
30.
I guess I'll move that we enforce, put the enforcement order into effect as written.
With the notice of intent or without?
With a notice of intent coming.
Within 30 days?
They should
No,
probably give
30,
more
what?
Well, I mean, Bob Perry has already been hired for this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not speaking for Bob Perry, but
The urgency.
we have required, in the past, if you have an emergency certification, we require a notice of intent to be filed within 30 days. So Bob Perry has already been on the case with this. He's been notified. So I think 30 days then is a
Okay,
reasonable.
so that's what my motion will be. Enforcement order is written, an NOI within 30 days.
Could you,
To amend the enforcement order.
amend to include.
could you review the enforcement order with me, please?
So the enforcement order as written requires removal of the newly built portions. It doesn't mention an NOI, but David is proposing to revise it to include the filing of an NOI within 30 days. I would recommend just filing it by March 7th because that is our deadline day, so they don't have
Because
to,
that's a what?
a deadline, the deadline day, so it'd give them another week.
What's the day on that?
March
March
7th.
7th.
March 7th?
So voting in favor would require them to remove that dock?
Would, to remove it and file a notice of intent for their plans to put in a new one.
And that's a motion, so I need a second.
That's the motion.
Is that to remove the dock or to leave it there?
Remove
Remove the dock
That's
until,
what the
yeah,
enforcement order said.
second.
A second, okay, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Jack, where are you? I didn't hear you vote.
Jack and Paul vote nay.
I go along, go ahead.
Yes or no?
Yes?
Everybody's yes except for Paul?
Okay,
So
so
1,
it's
2, 3, 4, 5.
5 to 1.
5 aye and 1 nay. All right, so there you go.
Thank you very much. I know it was a tough one. I appreciate your time, and we will be back with a notice of intent as soon as we can, and certainly by March 7th. The order, you'll send it to me, Brittany?
Yes, I have tried and failed in the past to send Rose mail.
You tried to send what?
I can't send her mail, so I will
Her
email it to
representative.
you.
If you send it to me,
Okay,
I'll be responsible and make sure she gets it.
okay,
You
great,
know where I am.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I do really appreciate your time. very
Thank you. Do you, well, you can go ahead and
Is there
sign
a-
for it.
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
Did you hear me?
Okay, can we just take we'll take a 2-minute recess?
Yeah, you know,
You
on, just,
I'll sign that with my signature on it.
But it's on the other
certified
page,
mail.
it's got the
Okay.
original, it's not the
That's
amended.
right,
I mean, we
mine
can
sign
amend
it
it by
and
hand
then
if you want to
write
do it that way.
ratified and the vote on it.
Do you want to amend it by hand and then we can sign it? We don't need that, all of us don't need to sign it, you can sign it for us.
Okay,
Okay?
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Yeah,
You didn't ask for public comment on that vote.
it's an
An
enforcement
enforcement
hearing, there is
hearing.
no public comment.
Okay, thank you.
so, that is the.
That's a tough one.
You didn't sign this.
This one?
No, it's a different one.
Oh, Nickerson. Oh, just the lawyer.
Anything we say is still being listened
So
to.
all the neighbors, so who don't
Guys?
want that thing there?
We're still on
Just
the air.
remember to
No.
mute if you're talking.
Oh, well,
Yeah, you can't just turn them off.
I muted it, I didn't turn it on.
Oh, that's all right. It needs that
Right.
turnover.
For the minutes?
All right. We are back.
8 months.
We are back in session. We are moving on to other business, that being the approval of meeting minutes for January 18th, 2024. Did somebody?
So move to accept?
Second?
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Oh, Teddy.
Any other business not reasonably anticipated?
I have one item just to keep on everyone's radar. The wetlands bylaw revisions are back. We are expecting to bring them to town meeting this spring, which is on April 30th. So at our next scheduled meeting on February 15th, we will be reviewing them with the board and the public and hoping to vote to send them to present to the Board of Selectmen at the end of February. And so those will be posted on the town website and distributed widely on a news blast to Channel 8, the town website, and social media. So be on the lookout for those, and if anyone wants to stop in the Conservation Office to read them, they are welcome to do so.
The open hearing will be the 15th,
Yes, our next meeting.
regular meeting.
At our regular meeting, yeah.
And hard copies for us? Is that what this is?
Yes,
Okay, I got it.
I have.
I would just remind everybody, if you want to go to the MACC meeting in Worcester, what is it, March 2nd, right?
Yes.
You need to get a hold of, or let Brittany know what she should register you for.
Yes, and it's a full day event. Ellie has registered so far.
Who has?
Ellie.
Ellie?
Yay, hopefully I'll get into the wood identification thing.
Okay, and other than that, anybody else?
I mean, I'm interested, I just haven't got that
Okay.
schedule yet.
Yeah, I'm in the same spot that I may be.
Yeah,
It's a great day.
should carpool.
Okay, if any other items anybody has?
Do we hold administrative meetings to discuss some of these kind of contentious interpretations of the rules and regs?
Typically, just to discuss them right at the hearing. If there are, I mean, if there's something that may require, or that we'd be talking about, maybe potentially moving toward changing regulations, that sort of thing, we might want to hold something separate, where it would be a separate meeting that we could do. But, I mean, normally we just discuss it and hash it out at the hearing. If there's something if it's a broader thing, then we might be able to call a special meeting if need be.
But it has to be a meeting, because if all of us meet here, we're having to do a public,
It has to be an advertised meeting,
yeah.
that sort of thing.
a public meeting.
There are or what do you call them? There are certain reasons for holding administrative reasons. What do you call those?
Executive.
You mean executive session?
Executive session.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This would, I mean, just discussing something in general would
That's what I'm
not
talking
qualify for it. But if you were discussing a particular court, potential court or legal
Yeah.
information, that's usually the one that we would go into executive session for. There's actually 10 reasons for it, but
Yeah.
that's
no,
the
I-
one that
I
we
remember.
usually,
Yeah.
that we usually have to deal with.
We don't get into personnel issues.
We don't get into personnel issues, so we don't have to do that. That would be the second, that would be the second biggest reason why you'd go in, but.
Yeah, one of the things that's difficult about this, that, and I'm fully aware of why, and I support it wholeheartedly, that any of our discussions have to be, transparent and public meetings. The thing is, this very table does not allow us to have a conversation the way we need to sometimes about certain of these issues. Sometimes conversations are held down at one end and the other end doesn't hear. And so it's not a really good forum for, to alleviate misunderstandings about various issues. It's awkward, it's again, not effective. So it's too bad that, I belong to the CPC where we meet around the table. And I'm just saying, it's just easier to sometimes talk about things when folks are across from you or just down from you. And so sometimes the way we have to do business, you have to say things down there that we don't even hear down here. So if that could be considered at some point in time, we're just thinking about this, is there any reason why this commission can't meet up in that room where the CPC meetings, I don't know what the
Yeah,
number
so
of the
I mean,
room is.
the reason we use the hearing room is because of the technology needed.
Well, there's technology there. We're on camera up there for the CPC meetings. The
Yeah.
only thing you don't have is as much space for the audience.
Yeah, so we do get a lot of public engagement in here.
I have a few of these, yeah.
So I don't think we would be approved for our meetings to be held in that room.
Approved by the selectmen? Approved by who?
Yeah, I guess, to move out of the hearing room and
I
to
mean,
to a
I
smaller.
understand that.
I think we
I
have
know,
to be
but
the
I'm
clerk.
saying, this is not the best table. For
Yeah.
some, I agree totally with Jack. As long as I've been on this committee, I've always wanted to just, let's get together and talk some about some of these contentious issues, these misunderstandings we have, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really hard. It's really hard to do. And I'm not trying to encourage any kind of secrecy. I'm just saying it's hard for people, volunteers, to get together and discuss these things sometimes the way they should be discussed, that type of thing.
Well, putting in context of, for instance, you pointed out, we could hold an executive if we're thinking of changing things.
So I have the executive session. There's only 3 reasons on here that you can have executive session.
10 reasons.
This one only has 3.
I don't know why they did that, but there are 10 reasons why you can move
Okay.
into executive session. But
But none of them are just to discuss, it can't be for regular ongoing things. Open meeting law requires us to meet in public sessions to discuss any item that's brought onto our agenda unless it's in litigation. So we can't really discuss any item in detail unless we're in this public setting, which I do understand is difficult.
So if you have questions, or if you want to make comments, then you're encouraged to make those comments. I think sometimes if two commissioners are talking, oftentimes they're asking a question to, what did the person say, or where, I don't know what it is.
I know.
I'm not,
I know.
Oftentimes when I whisper to him, it's, we have to sign that or not?
it's usually, yeah, if it's
I
David
understand
talking
that
to me,
totally,
it's usually, don't you have something to sign? It's like, which half the time.
There's somebody in the audience that wants to see you.
Well, but I'm
And
talking
Zoom.
about changing things in the bylaws, for instance. And if,
So that has to be done in a public meeting.
Yeah, public meeting.
even to talk about whether it's needed.
Yeah, I mean, if anything like a
I'd argue
regulation
that-
change or change to the bylaw, anything like that would have to be discussed in a public meeting. So it's not an executive session, it would be considered a public meeting that we would have to post an agenda for 48 hours in advance.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
let them know, let the
Could-
public know.
You could put on the agenda something like commission review of dock regulations and put it on, and just
Yeah.
have a discussion about
Yeah.
that. Or something pertinent to
I do have to put
our
it in the legal ad,
responsibilities.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
just have to have.
So that, for
To
example.
go to the agenda.
So
Yeah.
for example, if something comes up that kind of confuses some of us at the meeting, discussing about individual cases, we would not be discussing that. But we might be discussing
The broad.
the topic,
Yeah.
in a sense, the regulation that might have related to that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's, once in a while, something that should happen,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah, and so for example, the meeting for our next meeting, we're going to be reviewing the bylaw revisions. And the only reason we didn't have a working session, which would still be a public meeting for those bylaw revisions, is because we did the same thing in the fall. And the only changes we made were removing some of it, with some very minor exceptions. So I felt that the public session would be a great opportunity for the board to review it and comment, instead of having an additional meeting about it. I do understand you were not on the board the first time around, so let me know if you have comments, questions, and we'll go into more detail about them in the public meeting.
But it is my understanding that if I had a question and wanted to talk to you about it.
You can ask me
You can ask
anything.
At any time. It doesn't have to be an open hearing, or if Rick and I had a question,
Yeah,
because only two of us, we could do
Yes.
it. Or
So
even
you
three of
can't
us,
meet-
but if there are more than three, which is why when we go on site visits, we don't talk about
And
anything
again,
but ask questions.
even if it's 5 of you sitting there and you want to discuss, why does the regulation say this? You can discuss that. That's not you're not making any decision. You're just saying, why does the regulation read this way? You're not talking about any particular, don't say, well, what about, 123 Main Street or anything. You have to keep it,
General.
yeah, general and vague. But you can certainly, even if 5 of you were sitting there, and you could certainly do that. You just have to be very, you just have to be very careful when you're discussing that you keep it broad and not
Specific,
about a
item
particular,
specific, yeah.
especially one that you have either heard recently or are in the midst of hearing. So you can certainly do that. And if you have questions at any point, you can always ask myself or Brittany.
I'm a very careful person.
I'm sorry.
I said I'm a very careful person.
Motion to
To adjourn?
To adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned at 6:29.